Welcome back to the Decatur Dish. I am Maria Moreau with Atlanta News First, joined by founder and editor of Decaturish, Dan Wisenhunt. And this is a weekly show we like to do where we talk about what's been going on in DeKalb County, because there's always something going on in DeKalb County. Dan?
We're a very, very busy county, Maria. We have a lot of things going on. We're busy adults with many important things to do.
I want to move into a story that we talked about in previous segments, but continues to come up again and again, and that is involving the Decatur Square.
Well, they had a meeting last night. The Decatur City Commission has the ability to bond SPLA. So we've talked on the show before about special purpose local option sales tax, which is the penny sales tax the voters approve usually every year. And cities have the ability to borrow against it or bond it. And the city of Decatur is trying to get the square spruced up. It's an overdue renovation, and they're trying to get it done in 10 months so it'll be ready for the World Cup that is coming to Atlanta. It's going to be a significantly expensive project. They've bonded $8 million to pay for it. And it's going to be a disruptive project. We covered the Downtown Development Authority meeting the other day, and already the city leadership is strategizing as this is going on, as we have the square torn up for a few months to do all these renovations. How do we keep people coming to support these businesses in downtown Decatur? So they're talking about ways to build a campaign around that, not unlike what's going on with the Road Diet and Avondale Estates in that regard. Whenever we have these highly disruptive, expensive projects come through, there's always a disruption to the local businesses involved, and local governments are always doing the best that they can to try to minimize those disruptions for what will hopefully be a long-term payoff when these projects get done. That is what's happening. It is a very ambitious timeline. I will say the square as you know it now will not look the same in 10 months. It'll be a radically different place. They're going to move the statue. They're going to have some bathrooms. They're going to
staging area, play area.
It's going to be a different place.
Apparently taking over North McDonough Street.
They are. It is going to be a radically different place. So there will be a lot of transition going on in downtown Decatur. That construction is going to start very soon. They bonded the debt last night. Within weeks, they should start to break ground on it. And people who somehow missed the news are going to be calling me up and say, "What's going on in the square? I have no idea." And then I'll direct them to the stories we've written.
To the show.
That's
right.
Here. To the show.
You can join us. Well, as we move away from Decatur Square, I want to talk a little more around the state of Georgia, because we recently came out of Sine Die, and that was a big moment for the legislators, of course, for people here in Georgia to learn really what this year is going to be in terms of laws, the last legislative session, and a big one to come out of that. Dan, I saw you wrote about it. Our Atlanta News First political reporter Doug Reardon covered this, was changes to the open records bill that was being pushed forward and some language that was changed around at the last minute. I want to hear your thoughts on this, but first, let's go to our chief investigator, Brendan Keefe, with a look at what this bill entailed.
This would expand government secrecy in 3 ways in the state of Georgia. Now, first, anyone can file an Open Records Act request. That's journalists or even citizens to find out about crimes in our community. There's the initial incident report for even open cases where you can see what the officer said happened. And then for closed cases, we can get everything else. You can see police body camera, 911 calls, and other evidence. This would change that. Now, first, for open cases, police would be able to withhold that initial incident report narrative. They would be able to keep that part out of open records requests, even to citizens and journalists. And then for closed cases, it would expand just how long those cases would be considered closed. It would expand it all the way until all appeals have been extinguished and exhausted. So because anyone convicted of a crime can appeal all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court, that means police could keep this evidence secret for years or even decades. The General Assembly did one more thing. It added to the exemption it already gave itself. Lawmakers exempted themselves from the Open Records Act years ago. This would expand that to include agencies that communicate with the General Assembly. So we couldn't file records requests. You couldn't file records requests with state agencies, cities, other entities in Georgia to see how they're communicating with the General Assembly about policy. If you're asking why you haven't heard about this before, that's because the General Assembly slipped this into a bill that had already passed the Senate, SB 12, on a somewhat related topic. It went from a 3-page bill to a 34-page bill, and it's about government transparency. It could pass tomorrow and head to the governor's desk without any public comment. At the Georgia State Capitol under the Gold Dome, I'm Brendan Keefe, Chief Investigator. Atlanta News First investigates.
What are your thoughts?
I have so many thoughts about this. First of all, Maria, this actually stems from something that my new employer did. Appen Media Group has been locked into a public records fight with the city of Sandy Springs over police records for a couple of years now. The core issue is that when you request a police report, let's say you're requesting a police report about a homicide, the Sandy Springs Police Department will send you a report, I'm going to use air quotes, and the report will say a homicide happened in Sandy Springs. It will be that bare, and you won't know anything about what time it happened, when officers responded, what the specific address was, what they found there. And so my new employer, Appen Media Group, sued the city of Sandy Springs. It's one of the big reasons I reached out to them and proposed this merger, because they like a good public records fight, and so do I. It warms my crusty heart. And they have been winning. They've been scoring some victories at the appellate level, arguing correctly, I would say, that the open records law provides exemptions, and they being the city of Sandy Springs, are being overly generous with their interpretation of said exemptions. I will add that Sandy Springs Police is not unique in that regard. There are a ton of public agencies who take those exemptions and run with them and refuse to disclose almost anything. I've been fighting with the city of Decatur and the state of Georgia over records related to an arson that happened 2 years ago. This thing happened, and we're still fighting about it. So recently, the city of Sandy Springs suffered a setback in court, and as a result, the legislature introduced a bill that would have exempted all of these police reports from disclosure. So it would have severely curtailed what we do in the media when it comes to public safety reporting. We wouldn't have access to any of this stuff. It would have impacted the rights of citizens to know what's going on in their neighborhood. All of this because the city of Sandy Springs doesn't want to give my employer, Appen Media Group, full access to these police reports. And it ended up being a local tussle between a newspaper and a city, and it became a statewide issue because in order to correct this perceived problem, they introduced a bill that was so encompassing and so flawed that people got off the sidelines. Georgia Press Association, First Amendment Foundation, a bunch of groups who value that sort of thing got involved, and it was derailed. Thankfully, it was derailed. There was another part of that bill, too. I should add, it restricted access to communications between the state legislature and other state agencies. It's important for people to know that our legislators are already shielded from the Open Records Act anyway. Very clever how they did that. So they are already pretty opaque when it comes to getting information about what they do. The original intent of the bill, what was there before they added this substitute, was a bill that would have clarified that if you are requesting records that are in fact held by a private agency, let's just say the Atlanta Police Foundation, which handles the Cop City issue, that you have to actually get those records from a government agency. That was what the bill was designed to do originally. It clarified who the custodian of the records were under the law. In and of itself, not a bad thing. But in the process, as things often do in the legislature, something got substituted, added. They were considering it at the last minute, and right up until, how do you pronounce it?
Sine die.
Sine die. I learned something new today. Thank you, Maria. Sine die. Up until the last minute, sine die. They were considering this. Let's just say it's an atrocious piece of legislation. It would have harmed our ability to do our jobs. It would have harmed the citizens' ability to know stuff that's going on in their community. So that bill is dead. We cannot assume it will stay dead. And I don't know who needs to hear this. I hope that the things that we say and do on the show reach the ears of important people. The correct response to any piece of legislation that is restricting the public's right to know stuff is to push for legislation that radically expands the public's right to know stuff. And what needs to happen next year, and you'll probably see an editorial from me about this at some point, is there needs to be a whole package. The open records law that we have now is actually really good compared to what we used to have. Sam Owens, when he was the Attorney General over a decade ago, worked with people in both parties to radically expand our access to what we could do. Now, of course, things have changed a lot. Digital publishing has changed. The business of how we get and receive information has changed. There are things that were written in the law with a certain intent, and lawyers, as lawyers do, read into some of those exemptions generously. It might be time to come and clarify those. I hope what will happen, Maria, is that this will become a starting point for a very robust conversation about how we can clarify and expand the Open Records and Open Meetings Act to ensure that it is very transparent for everyone what you can get, and if you can't get something, it's transparent why you can't get it. That's really would be the best response, because I can tell you this is probably not the last time we're going to hear about a bill like this being floated in the state legislature, and I really hope that the leaders in our industry are capable of meeting this moment with the approach of a good offense is sometimes the best defense. And really, we need to take a holistic look at the Open Records Act and Open Meetings Act in Georgia and push for more, ask for more, demand more of our state leaders on this issue. I'm going to get off my soapbox. Not really, because I
was going to
need to
say,
be able to
ask
see
a journalist about an open records bill.
I could. I
Go
mean,
on for the whole rest of the episode.
we could. I am very passionate about this issue. I think it's frankly absurd that because the city of Sandy Springs was so angry that they might have to turn over records to my parent company, Appen Media, that they were in fact pushing something that would have taken away rights from all of us, taken away our ability to access public information. I don't know where that comes from. I don't know what drives that mentality, but I know it got a lot of people off the sidelines that were on the sidelines about this issue, and I hope they stay engaged, because we need their help to improve our open records and open meetings laws here in Georgia. They're better than they used to be. They could be even better than they are now.
Can I hit you with something even more riveting?
Sure.
Talk to me about composting.
Composting in the city of Avondale Estates.
You just slid right into that one.
Composting.
Let's lay the ground for the people as I so make you switch topics here. Avondale Estates halting a program that assisted over 500 homes and kept a total of 80,243 pounds of waste out of landfills. And they're saying we're putting a pause on it.
They're funded through a federal grant. They got about $300,000 to do this free composting program through the United States Department of Agriculture. People were able to put bins on their curb, and somebody would come pick them up. Now they're talking about keeping that program going, charging residents $29 a month. I know this seems like small potatoes, but I really, readers, viewers, stick a pin in this, because this is going to be the first of many things that are going to happen over the next few months. Most of our local governments have fiscal years that run from June 30 to July 1, or July 1 to June 30. We're coming up on budget season. Lorraine Cochran Johnson, the new CEO of DeKalb County, put a hiring freeze in place a few days ago. DeKalb County gets $300 million from the feds That's about 20% of DeKalb County's budget. It's not nothing. We don't know how much of that they're going to lose with the federal funding pullbacks. But this thing we've seen in Avondale Estates with the composting program, it's really the beginning of what we're going to see coming at the local level this spring as the leadership in our cities work to craft these budgets and are doing so with the reality that the funding that they were counting on might not be there. It's going to be particularly difficult for schools, which we're going to talk about Decatur schools in a minute. These budget meetings are going to sound like drug interventions. It's going to be really sobering stuff. People are going to have to reckon with the fact that they're going to get reduced services now in some cases because of what they are or not getting. A big part of the problem is we're not really clear on what's being withheld and why. We're kind of guessing. It appears to be happening at the whims of the current administration. Pay attention, because this composting thing, it seems silly and quaint and just like a federal grant you'd use just because you've got to spend the money. This is really a canary in the coal mine for what's about to come. The next one thing I've asked my team at Decatorish to do, and every reporter should be doing this, frankly, email all of the local governments and agencies you cover right now that get federal money. Ask them how much of their annual budget is federal funds. Ask how much they were planning to get next year. Ask what the sources of that funding was and what it was going to be spent on. Those are very simple questions, but every reporter everywhere, including Atlanta, needs to be asking them right now, because the rubber is fixing to meet the road when it comes to these budget discussions. Schools, again, we're going to move into schools real quick. Schools are going to be the hardest hit. They depend on more federal funding than most other entities in our area. So really can't emphasize enough, pay attention to what's about to happen at the local government, y'all. If you think what's happening at the federal level, it does, normally I would say it doesn't impact us. What happens at the federal level usually doesn't. It's about to, and it's about to start affecting us in a big way.
Well, let's talk about it. City Schools of Decatur. We're talking about federal and state orders that prompted a 2-minute emergency meeting involving the superintendent. What is all that even about?
That is a great question, Maria. They had a 30-minute closed-door meeting known as an executive session, followed by a 2-minute meeting where they didn't really say anything. I will say the school board members looked like they'd all been punched in the gut. They looked absolutely deflated in that meeting call, and they gave the superintendent sort of blanket authority to do whatever she needed to do to comply with these executive orders that are coming from the feds and the state. We don't know when this happened, but around the time this meeting happened, all the diversity, equity, and inclusion language was pulled off the district's website. And the school board, I want to be careful, because right now there's a lot of fear happening. And it's a really disconcerting amount of fear for a country that is ostensibly a democracy. The school board is scared to tell us what's happening. I feel comfortable saying that. The Decatur School Board does not feel confident that if they tell us the truth about what they're doing and why, that they're not going to be targeted by the people who have a lot of say over how the school district operates. As I alluded to earlier, federal funding is a big part of school district operations, and they are doing everything they can to respond to things that, frankly, I don't think any of them agree with, and do it in such a way that does not openly express that disagreement for fear of being targeted. I think that's going to be something that you'll see play out at the local level during budget time, because we all know what's happening. We all know that there are things coming down from on high at the federal government level that are being used to coerce people into silence about what's going on. You've seen this happen at the university level around the country. Universities are afraid to speak out about what's going on for fear of having their funding pulled. Law firms, they're doing the same thing. It is becoming a culture of acquiescence and complacency and silence. And what I am deeply concerned about as somebody who values democracy and the democratic process is that we're going to start being quiet about really, really important things in this country. And I am very concerned and disturbed that our school board had a meeting and only spoke very, very loosely for 2 minutes, very broadly about what they were doing because they were afraid. Our elected leaders in this country should not be afraid to state publicly the truth about what's going on. And if we're getting to a point where that's the case, we're in trouble. We're in for a wild, wild ride. I hate to get on a bunch of soapboxes today because I don't want to do that. I try to be nice and positive and entertaining, but that meeting I saw on Friday was disturbing. It was a very disturbing sight to see local elected officials. They didn't get elected at the federal level. They got elected by the people in Decatur. And because they are so afraid of what's happening at the federal and state level, they can't even look their constituents in the eye and tell them what's going on. And I'm not blaming them for that. It's not a lack of courage. These school board members are doing what they feel is in their best interest to protect students. That's who they're there to serve first, above all other people. I get where they're coming from. I get why they don't want to talk about this. I just think it's absurd that we've gotten to a place where we can't even say, hey, we're doing this, but we don't agree with it, without fear of being targeted further. There's a lot of stuff that's going on in this country right now, and it's hard to keep up with sometimes. I'm going to encourage our viewers and readers to really start paying attention to, we've preached about the importance of local news forever now, it seems, but it's going to be even more important than it ever has been in a very short amount of time, especially as we get into budget season.
Yeah, and especially for the work that you all have done at Decatur-ish with bringing some of these accountability stories forward. Our own investigators here at Atlanta News First, we're going to stay on top of all of these types of stories and more that I'm sure will come out as we go through this year and the coming years. Dan, we come together every Tuesday to talk about what's been going on in DeKalb County and a little more sometimes, but the news never stops. And so where can people connect with Decatur-ish?
They can find us on Decaturish.com. That's the best way to get all of our news. Sign up at Locally Sourced News for our free newsletter. And to check out episodes of this show, download the Atlanta News First Plus app. You can get access to this show and all the other great content produced by our partners in Atlanta News First. Maria, how is that day? Is it Sine? How do you?
Sine die.
Sine die.
Sign
And
or
at the
die.
and at the Sine die, they throw their papers up, right?
I actually have that video.
You have the video? They throw the
Let's
papers
play
up. Okay, they're throwing the papers up. Okay, so I'm starting a vacation tomorrow. It is the first vacation I've taken in like 2 years.
Okay.
And I have these note cards. Can I throw my note cards?
Go ahead, go
Okay.
for it.
I'm throwing
There
the
we
note
go.
cards.
Oh, you did it off camera.
I
but
did it off
saw
camera. All right. Well, it rained like confetti. My note cards rained like confetti. I'm going on vacation. Good luck, everybody. Don't commit any crimes while I'm gone, please.
And we'll see you next Tuesday for
right.
another episode of Decatur Dish with Dan back from vacation and resting.
Rested.
Have a great day.
You too.